Hello, welcome back to my channel. Welcome to another monthly reading wrap-up. Super excited to be sharing all of the books I read in the month of September with you. It was a very eclectic reading month. I feel like that's kind of a trend that I've seen for the past couple of months here on my channel, mostly because as we near the end of the year, I am trying to frantically read the books that I haven't read yet for the 3 list videos that I have coming for the end of the year. And that means that the stuff that I'm reading is not just romance anymore. It is an interesting collection of historical romance, romantasy, but also literary fiction and nonfiction. It's an interesting mix that I'm going to be talking to you about today, and I'm super excited to do so. Honestly, I'm even more excited for the months ahead. I don't know about you, but fall is like my absolute favorite time of year. If you don't follow me over on the vlog channel, you might not know that I am going on a trip in a couple of months that I am so hyped about. I'm actually going to be vlogging it as well. That means I've been saving pretty aggressively, and I'm also really trying to stay on top of my expenses. It's just super, super important to me. And today's sponsor, Rocket Money, is here to help. Rocket Money is the personal finance app that helps you cancel subscriptions, lower bills, manage your money better. I'm using Rocket Money to cancel my unwanted subscriptions. It safely and securely identifies any recurring charges and cancels my unwanted subscriptions. You can even cancel from within the app with just a couple of taps. You don't have to worry about having to deal with customer service calls, which I don't know about you, but I hate. And I'm also using Rocket Money to lower my bills. Uploading a picture of my bill and just tapping a few buttons, Rocket Money negotiates for me from internet service to cable to phone bills. Rocket Money has helped its customers save up to $740 a year when they use all of the features with over 500 million in canceled subscriptions. To save more and spend less, join the over 5 million members using Rocket Money today. Go to rocketmoney.com/chandler.ainsley or click the link in the description to get started for free. You can also unlock even more features with premium. That's rocketmoney.com/chandler.ainsley to get started for free. Let's get into the 19 books that I read in the month of September. First up is a book that I honestly am surprised that I have not read up until this year, and it is Crazy Rich Asians. This book I actually read for 2 of the 3 list videos that I'm working on, so it was kind of a 2 birds, 1 stone situation, which I really appreciated. I have watched the movie. I watched the movie before I read the book many years ago, and I was excited to see if the book differed a ton from the movie. This book is about Rachel and Nick. Rachel is a professor in New York, and I believe Nick is as well. They meet kind of as they are both professors, and she has no idea that Nick is part of one of Singapore's wealthiest families. So they've been dating a while, and she thinks things are serious, but I don't think she's like looking for a proposal necessarily anytime soon. But they go on this trip, and Rachel is just completely gobsmacked at the wealth that is in Singapore, the wealth that surrounds these different families. And they're traveling to Singapore for a wedding. She's like his wedding date. It's a fun book. It's definitely a fun book. I will say I think the movie is a little bit more exciting given that the multiple cast of characters is cut down just a little bit so that you're not having to remember so many different names, especially since I don't think all of the characters in the book are like super important to the plot. Whether it's the book or the movie, there's something so delightful about being in this like lavish Asian country that is just insane with the amounts of like wealth. It's interesting seeing a different way of living that just feels glamorous. I mean, whether it's like Gossip Girl or, you know, any of the other programs like that out there that just like show you how the other half lives. I fucking love that stuff. I think it is so entertaining. The only thing I didn't love about this book is that the whole point is supposed to be like Rachel and Nick come from like different socioeconomic backgrounds and different cultures, and like they don't fully, it's not that they don't understand each other, but like she doesn't feel like she fits in, and he doesn't really know how to ingratiate her well enough, even though he's like very much in love with her or whatever. I didn't really like buy their romance very much. It didn't feel very like romantic. Granted, I don't think that's like the whole point of the book, but I kind of wish that we had gotten like some other introduction into the society, if that makes sense. Like I just kind of wish the romance hadn't existed at all. So really liked Astrid's characters. Like, I don't know. I have mixed feelings about this book. I think I give it like 3 stars. I would prefer to watch the movie, to be honest, but I love that this book gained so much popularity, and I would love to see more books with just really fucking rich people who don't just live in like Europe and America. Next book that I read this month was Everything I Never Told You by Celeste Ng. I read Little Fires Everywhere a couple of months ago and really actively disliked it because of what it said about motherhood specifically. There were elements of that book that I liked and enjoyed, but I was really excited to read this one because I was hoping that that would be not an issue in this book, that like, you know, parenthood and people's journeys to like motherhood wouldn't be a part of this book. It wasn't, but there was definitely a big like family aspect to the story. So let me try to break it down for you. The story is about Marilyn and James. Marilyn is a white woman. James is an Asian man. They end up marrying despite the fact that they are kind of living in the 60s and 70s in semi-rural America. Their relationship is kind of, I don't want to say fraught with tension at the beginning, but like you could definitely tell that there's going to be some issues later on. Anyway, flash forward, they have 3 children, and Lydia, their daughter, is like their pride and joy, their hope for the future. For some background, for some context, James is a professor at a university. Marilyn grew up with a single mom who yearned to be like a trad wife, basically, but just couldn't do that because she was a single parent. He tried to pass on to Marilyn this idea that like she should be that way, and Marilyn always kind of rejected that, rebuffed that, wanted to be a doctor, wanted to like go after her dreams. Because she married James, because she ended up having children, she couldn't actually pursue her dreams in the way that she wanted to, which is super heartbreaking. But she ends up passing a lot of her own ideals, hopes, ambitions onto her daughter, kind of like her mom did to her. She really pushes Lydia, her daughter, to like be this perfect, studious, advanced for her years person, even though Lydia doesn't necessarily want the same things that her mom wants. And then James, because he is an Asian guy in America in like the 70s in Ohio, he wants his kids, even though they are mixed, and that's a challenge of in and of itself, navigating that identity, especially when the people around here are mostly white. He wants his daughter to lean into her whiteness almost, to like be as social as possible, and he puts a lot of pressure on her to have friends. And so Lydia is just getting all this pressure from both ends. The whole story starts because Lydia at the beginning of the story is found dead, and we're trying to figure out if someone wanted her dead, if she maybe took her own life. And as the story unfolds, you start learning about the family dynamics and just the complicated relationships between everybody. And this book is very real. It is very raw. Had me thinking a lot about motherhood, even though I didn't want to. It was in a different way, and I think that this was something that I appreciated, I guess, a little bit more. If you're not careful, your own failed dreams and failed hopes and failed expectations can fall on someone else. I don't know, it was a really illuminating book, and I appreciated all of the intricacies and the nuances. I kind of wish that maybe the conclusions and the ending of the book had been handled a little bit differently. I think I'd give this book like 3 or 4 stars. It wasn't like a perfect book for me. I appreciated that this wasn't one that tried to tell you how to feel. I think often with literary fiction stories, they can tell you how to feel because of the sad things that happen. And in this book, yes, sad things happen, but I think you are able to see how characters react the way that they do. And instead of demonizing them or like painting anyone as a villain, it's like these people are complex, and people make mistakes even with the best of intentions. I thought it was interesting, and I understand why this one gets like so much love. Third book that I read this month was an interesting one, and I was checking on Goodreads just to make sure that I had all the characters' names down because it's been a while since I've read this one. And when I checked Goodreads, the overall average rating for this book is 2.9 stars. Remedial Magic by Melissa Marr is an adult fantasy novel that is being pitched as this kind of like quirky contemporary romantasy kind of situation, witchy book, that it is not, okay? So this book is about 3 main characters. We've got Daniel, who is a gay man dying of cancer, Maggie, who at the beginning of the story is trying to run away from her abusive ex with her teen son, and then we have Ellie, who is a librarian who is searching for her next great adventure. And by that I mean she doesn't live an adventurous life, but she wants to find a lady love for herself. Each of these people ends up getting snatched up from the human world and taken to this, I don't even know if we'd call it an alternate reality, different dimension, different realm, I'm not really sure, but they end up in this place that I can't remember the name of. They find out that they all have witchy abilities, but these latent magical abilities need to be trained, and if they are strong enough, they are allowed to stay in this like magical world and join one of the great magical houses. But again, they have to be trained up in the school of remedial magic. Each of these people, I should say, is like in their 30s or older. Like, this is not a young people's fantasy book, shall we say. What's interesting is this book is initially peddled as just a sapphic romance. It's going to be a romance between kidnapper and kidnapped, so Ellie, our lesbian librarian, and the person that kidnaps her, but it's so much more than that. We have multiple points of view, multiple different things happening. When everybody gets to this magical realm, when everybody's been like snatched up, they realize that the place that they're at is really cool. But there's also like infighting amongst different people who are trying to figure out how to make this place better and how to save it from the fact that the magic and or their resources are starting to like dwindle. It's an interesting story. Each of the characters handles the idea of being like snatched up and being a witch very differently. Maggie wants to get back to her kid at any cost. She rejects this like chosen one idea. Ellie is like kind of happy to be there, but she also misses her grandmother who she takes care of. She kind of doesn't trust the person that she's falling for. And then Daniel, he's like, yo, I had cancer and I don't have cancer in this magical place. I'm happy to be here. And he's willing to kind of like turn his back on different people because of this. So it's an interesting book. I actually genuinely enjoyed this. I listened to this on some of my morning walks. I think the reason this book kind of has a hard time is the marketing of it. Like, look at this cover and tell me this doesn't look like every other witchy romance that comes out right now. It's not that. It's literally not that. And I think that if you pick up this book expecting that, you're going to be sorely disappointed because it's just not that. But when you accept this book for what it is, I honestly think it was kind of a good time. Fantastical, but kind of like light fantasy and more about the politics and the human relationships. I personally enjoyed this. I thought it was kind of fun, okay? I give this book 3 stars. Perfect to know. Is this a book that I think I'm going to think about forever? Probably not. It is, however, one of those books that I think like 10 years from now, if you asked me the plot of this book, I could probably tell it to you. So, I mean, I guess it was memorable enough in that way. I don't know who I would market this book to or who who I'd tell to read this, but if my synopsis of it sounded interesting, maybe give it a go. Oh god, I think I actually talked about this in last month's wrap up, so I was almost done with it, but it took me weeks to finish the last 20% of Quicksilver by Kelly Hart. This book is about Kingfisher, what a name, and Heiress. Heiress is living in squalor. She doesn't have access to water and resources like she should because she's living in a slummy part of town, shall we say. The person, the queen who is in charge of the town, hoarding the resources, hoarding the water, of course, because like, you know, what tyrant wouldn't? She ends up trying to steal some shit though, and she does get captured for this, take it to the queen, and she is going to be executed. But what happens instead is that she activates this magical Quicksilver. Out arises this man. He is magical and he steals Heiress, takes her to the Feylands, and she realizes, oh shit, Fae exists? I didn't know that. And she finds out actually that like other fantastical beasts and creatures exist as well, and that her queen doesn't need to hoard these resources. She's just like kind of being a bitch for no reason. And you know, magical shit unfolds, secrets unfold. She finds out more about Kingfisher. She bones down with Kingfisher. Calls him Fisher, by the way. Like the king just kind of get rid of that. We get rid of the prefix. I liked this book. I think here's the thing. I liked the beginning of this book. I felt like the world was interesting enough. The pacing was pretty fucking good, and that's the main complaint I feel like I have with romantasy books, is that interesting ideas, interesting concepts, but the way that the book is put together and the pacing of them, a lot of them fall short. This one, I was so entertained until we got to the 80% mark. These two feel like they're destined for each other, of course, because it's a fucking romantasy book, and I got kind of bored, you know? I was like waiting for them to smang, and then they did, and then I was like, okay, why isn't the book over yet? Where's the third act conflict? Where is this like reveal of information where she's like, actually, I don't want to be with you, you know? Like that's the ending of every romantasy book. It did surprise me that that wasn't necessarily the ending of this book, but yeah, the last 20% just me not that interested to carry on with the series. It's a book, and I understand why this one like got picked up by traditional publishing and like why everybody fucking loves it. Let me know in the comments though, like if you read this and if you liked it and like where the stands in your ranking of romantasy books. Let me know if there's a romantasy book that I haven't read that you think that I just like have to read. I feel like I'm very much in my romantasy era in the sense that like I have been picking up better and better romantasy books. This one, I don't know. I think I'm gonna give it 4 stars. Like it wasn't perfect, but it wasn't bad. Last Night at the Telegraph Club by Melinda Lowe. This one I probably would not have picked up on my own just given the vibe of the book. It's like a YA, queer, historical, and don't get me wrong, I love queer books. I certainly do. But it was YA, so I was like, okay, less intrigued, less interested. This book's about our two main characters, Lily and Kath, growing up during the Red Scare in San Francisco. Lily lives in Chinatown. She goes to high school with a bunch of white people, I'm pretty sure, and she ends up meeting Kath, and they bond over their not shared interests necessarily, but like Lily has a really big passion for space, air travel, I think, or like maybe I think actually Kath has passion for air travel. Anyway, they like bond over like their shared love of science and math. They kind of fall in love, and they go to this like club late at night where they get to see like drag performers and get to meet up with other queer youth and like people in their 20s and stuff, just navigating their relationship. This one was hard. It was very atmospheric, and it was definitely a time period of history that I just like don't think about very often, or you know, haven't learned much about. So I really appreciated the understanding that I gained from reading this book. I feel like it was just kind of a slow moving, like, I want to say bland story. Like there was definitely something to be gained from this, but it just isn't the kind of book that I'm like obsessed with. I'm not super into, I would say pure, like this is more historical fiction than it is like historical romance, and I think that's maybe why I just didn't enjoy this quite as much. I mean, the romance is kind of at the center of the story. The ending of this book, like it's not quite romance. Like I don't mean to spoil it, but like it's not, I don't know how to feel about this one. I think I give it 3 stars. Do you ever read a book and then immediately forget it? I talked to you just a second ago about how I don't think I'm gonna forget Remedial Magic anytime soon, but I will, and I have forgot Not Your Crush's Cauldron. And ironically, this book is a witchy romance, so don't really know what that says about me. I guess I only have room this whole noggin for one witchy romance at a time, but this book's about our two main characters, Olive and Bax. I think that's short for Baxter. She is a witchy triplet. This is the 3rd book in a series, I believe, and I think I've read both of the other ones, or DNF both of them. I don't know. They weren't memorable, I can tell you that much. Olive is a professor, and she's a witch, and I guess like magical people, like witches, werewolves, that sort of thing, are like out in society, and have been for a little bit, but like aren't fully accepted maybe. I don't know. She's a professor, and she kind of teaches people about the culture and the histories of different magical people, and she poses this question and or this challenge, assignment, whatever, for students, where she's like, hey, I want you to like go outside of your comfort zone this semester, and she is going to do the same. So she like writes a list of things that she's going to do to go outside of her comfort zone. She's gonna be a daredevil. That actually ends up working out really well because the guy she has a crush on, who she's living with, he is a guardian angel, which I guess is like some sort of magical thing. Like you don't really think about that like with witches and werewolves and shit, right? He is assigned to look after her, and that's kind of the romance. And initially, like the first couple couple of chapters of this book, I was intrigued. I thought that their chemistry was like pretty much there and I was into it. But like once he gets assigned to her to be her guardian angel, I was just like not into it. I think this author's writing just isn't for me. I feel like it's as simple as that. It's not a bad book. It's not a good book. It's just not a book for me. Moving on to a book that I quite enjoyed, that I didn't expect to enjoy because I didn't enjoy the first book in the series, but Isabelle and the Rogue, quite good, quite good. I really enjoyed this. I think that I am growing an increasing interest in historical romances with characters who are not white and in contexts that are different than most of the books that I read, if that makes sense. Okay, let me try to explain it to you. Isabelle and Sirius are our two main characters. Isabelle is from Mexico and she is in England? I feel like that's kind of weird. With her three sisters. Her eldest sister has married someone who I believe is like in Parliament. Isabelle is trying to spy for Mexico. Like Mexico is, I think, in war with France. Our heroine's trying to get some intel about France and about England and like pass it on to people in Mexico. She, I believe, is the daughter of like someone important politically in Mexico. Yeah, she's just trying to find intel and insight, and so she has to kind of like sneak around these like ballrooms and these parties to like what's up. And Sirius is actually kind of doing the same, but for other reasons. And in doing so, he and Isabelle kind of like are in leagues together. Not really in leagues together. I don't think they really know what the other person's doing, but like both doing some kind of shady shit at the beginning of the book, and they kind of fall in love. And I don't know, I'm finding I really like books where our heroines are really plucky, have a lot of nerve, and yet aren't doing things for stupid reasons, if that makes sense. Like our heroine and the things that she's doing, yes, they're risky and potentially like she's acting a little stupidly to get the things she wants, but like the shit she's doing is very high stakes, right? Like there's a lot riding on her getting this intel and this insight. I just loved that. I also loved how much she was seen by our hero. She is, I believe, darker skinned than her sister and looks more, I guess, Mexican than her sister. And so she feels like she is not as seen or as valued for her beauty. He is like, he's enamored with her in all aspects, and that is something that I absolutely love. One thing I can't fucking stand is when heroines are described as like plain or not conventionally attractive and the hero thinks that. Like the hero's like, yeah, like she's not traditionally beautiful, but I like her. I fucking hate that. I'm sorry, I don't like that. In this book, he is obsessed with her. He's like, she is gorgeous, she is smart, she loves her family. Like, I'm obsessed with this woman. I eat that shit up every time, okay? I love, obviously, when a hero can like see the heroine's flaws and like love her despite them, but like, I don't want that when it comes to her beauty. I don't want that when it comes to like her main character traits. Like, he needs to be obsessed with her. Guess what? He was. I genuinely really enjoyed this book, and I think that if you are looking for a historical romance that feels a little bit different, quite sexy, quite steamy, I would highly recommend this one. I didn't love the first book in the series, but I really did enjoy this one. Yeah, it kind of gives me like butterflies just thinking about it. It's a good one. Next up is a book that couldn't be more different than that one. It's a contemporary romance written by Kennedy Ryan that I feel like I don't hear people talk about. It is Until I'm Yours, which is a book about Sophie and Trevor. If I'm understanding correctly, this is like the third or fourth book in a series, and Sophie is a character who tries to break up someone's like relationship in the other books, and so she's kind of the villain, right? She's this unlikable heroine going into this book, and I didn't know that. Well, I mean, you find out through the course of the story that that's the case, but I didn't know that going into this book. It's very much a black cat golden retriever romance. Our heroine is supposed to entice this guy to like sell his company to her father's company, but he wants more than just like a tumble with her. He is kind of very much into her and her personality despite her prickliness, and he wants to break down her walls, get to understand her, and in typical Kennedy Ryan fashion, that is done just so beautifully. Major trigger warning for SA. This book very much handles that topic. It is a main plot point of this book. Her heroine has trauma in her past. Me Too movement vibes in this book for sure. I thought it was handled very well, but is definitely not a lighthearted romance because of that. I really appreciated this book. I didn't know what to expect because this is not one of Kennedy's more popular series. I believe both of the characters in this book are white, but I liked it. I thought it was like pretty solid, especially considering this is one of the first books that she's written, and it's nice to see how her writing has grown over time, but also amazing to see that like she's always been fucking brilliant. So I enjoyed this one. I gave this one 3 stars. The only reason I didn't rate this one higher is because I felt like the third act conflict was a little bit frustrating, but like moving on to The Familiar. I talked at length about this one in the vlog that I did right before this, but this book is about our two main characters, Lucia and Santanhel. Our heroine is basically living under the stairs and is a servant for these two kind of awful people until they find out she has magical abilities. And this is during the Spanish Inquisition, where magic and or other religions besides Christianity, specifically Catholicism, not a good vibe, not something you should be doing. But if you can spin your magic as miracles from God, you can gain favor with like the king and like with people higher up and like whatever. So these two people who are our heroine's employers try to use her magic to like gain social standing or whatever, and through this process she ends up entering into a sort of like magical competition to like become the king's ex-secretary's like favored or whatever. And so she undergoes this this competition against these other people, and that's the book. That's what happens. But it's more than that, right? She like meets this kind of like creepy semi-vampiric man who like kind of trains her with her magical abilities. There's a lot more to the story than meets the eye, but this, again, it's set in Spain during the Spanish Inquisition, and it's just an interesting one. It's an interesting one. I'm surprised that this is a story that like our author felt really needed to be told. It's kind of random, and I like don't know who the fuck I would recommend this book to, but if you like Ninth House and you don't necessarily mind slow moving fantasies that feel sensuous, very horny, but like on a low-key kind of subtle level, maybe pick this one up. You know, sometimes you pick up books for list videos and you just kind of scratch your fucking head at why these books are popular. You know what? No, I understand why this one's popular. A Gentleman in Moscow was a book, I don't know why, but the book cover that I got from my library for this one, I just thought this was going to be kind of like Sherlock Holmesy. It's not that. This is like if a grown man who was like under house arrest in a hotel in Moscow was Eloise at the plaza, because he was like semi-royalty or whatever, and there's a revolution going on and we don't really like royalty anymore, so he's basically under house arrest. He's like not put to death, which is super cool. He's basically stuck in this place for the rest of his life, and while he's there he muses on life, the people who come and go. It's very like Eloise at the plaza if Eloise was like a fucking old Russian man. I don't know, I feel like this book is very slow. I think that if you're the kind of person who enjoys like books with small moments of poignance and shit like that, like maybe this is for you. Just not that kind of reader. If you like Matt Haig and stuff like that, this could maybe be for you. Another historical romance with a heroine who is not white, Hathor and the Prince. I've never read any books by, I can't remember the name of the author, maybe like J.J. McAvoy or something like that. Never read any books by this author before, but this is a kind of like alternate version of history sort of situation, kind of like Bridgerton, which I kind of appreciate. Hathor, our main character, is one of many siblings who all have these very like fanciful historical names and who are all trying to find partners, I guess. Some of them are too young to find partners, but like she has some elder siblings who have found their great loves. But there is very determined. She is a very specific kind of character that I think will rub some people the wrong way, but she is insistent that whoever she marries needs to be hot and they need to have a title. Invites people to her country home. I guess her parents invite people to the country home to like all mingle, right? It's not just like her and a bunch of dudes. There's like other women as well, like in her social circle. They're all gonna like find partners. One of the people who ends up showing up is a prince. This would be like the ultimate title. The problem is that Hathor cannot fucking stand this guy. His name is Wilhelm. She doesn't know him before the beginning of this book. They just rub each other the wrong way from the first meeting, and a lot of the first part of this book is spent with them butting heads, arguing, playing pranks on each other, and it's kind of childish, but I kind of really enjoyed it. I really loved how steadfast and strong she was. I also appreciated the nuance of our hero. He is a prince, but he doesn't really have any political power because his dad fucking hates him, and he is only at this particular place because his aunt is the Queen of England. He's kind of exiled, but he's like living in England, and he's just trying to like marry so he can get some sort of inheritance that has nothing to do with his dad, I think, and just like vibe. But anyway, after the first 50% of this book, things proceed in fairly normal fashion. You know, it's a historical romance. They get a little freak nasty. They do end up marrying, of course. I mean, it's a historical romance. They get married, of course. The third act conflict is not a breakup. It was interesting. I did not expect it. I enjoyed it. How about that? I enjoyed it. I thought it was great. It was sexy. 4 stars. I didn't realize how many historicals I read this month with non-white heroines. Love that. I genuinely love that. Indigo by Beverly Jenkins is a fucking classic, and I can't believe it's taken me this long to read it. When I put this on my currently reading shelf, I think I had like be softy enough this one. I'm not really sure why, to be honest, because it's great. This book's about our 2 main characters, Hester and Galen. Hester is a conductor on the Underground Railroad. She used to live in the South. Now she lives in Michigan, near Detroit, I believe. She ends up helping a guy who has been grievously injured, and she finds out that this guy, Galen, is the Black Daniel. And the Black Daniel is this like notorious guy who ends up stealing enslaved people from the South and bringing them up north. He is from a very, very wealthy family in New Orleans, comes from a very different background than our heroine, and he is instantly drawn to her as she is nursing him back to health, but she wants kind of nothing to do with him. She is engaged, even though it's like not necessarily an engagement out of love. It's more like this is a business transaction kind of thing, and like we could help each other, mutually beneficial sort of thing. She just has no interest in breaking that engagement to like be with this guy who's a major fucking player. As the story carries on, you see that Galen's intentions are actually pretty true and pretty pure, even though at the beginning he doesn't necessarily think that. He's like kind of just like wanting to fuck. As the story carries on, he realizes how much he really appreciates appreciates how strong of character and of like mind heroine is, and how beautiful he finds her. And I love the story. Again, kind of reminds me of Isabelle and the Rogue in the sense that like our heroine is described as like not the most typically beautiful, but he thinks she is absolutely stunning and can't understand why not everybody thinks the same way. Just completely enamored with her. And this book has the added benefit of like our hero being super wealthy and like getting her a lot of gifts, just wanting to spoil her and lavish her with things, even without the expectation of like her falling for him. He's like, you just deserve the good life. Something about that really does it for me. I love this book, especially the last chapter. Like top 10 moments of a hero in a romance for me. So deeply romantic. This was just phenomenal. And I've read other books by Beverly Jenkins before, but it was really nice to read her classic and understand why it is such a classic. It was so good. So if you haven't picked this up, you should. 5-star book. I think this is probably the best book that I read this month. Next up, I read Klara and the Sun. We have 2 books back to back that I just like didn't personally connect with. They're meant to talk about humanity and humanity's foibles and shit, and like maybe I don't care. My brain's rotted. Klara and the Sun is about an artificial friend named Klara who was sitting in a shop window just hoping one day that a girl will bring her home. One day someone does, and that person is Josie. Josie has sort of a hard and interesting life. She is sick. She is smaller than other girls her age. I want to say at the beginning of the book she's like 14. She ends up taking Klara home. He tells her before she brings her home, hey, my family life and just like my vibe is a little different than other people's, so be prepared that the things that you're going to observe might not be what you expect, but like, do you want to come home with me anyway? Like, she actually gives Klara the choice, and Klara's like, yeah, sure, fuck it, let's do it. Maybe not that cavalierly. Klara's kind of childlike and is like, yeah, I love you. She takes her home, and the book is just kind of about like humanity and what it means to be human. And I'm gonna be honest, I don't know that that message really landed. Author writes some interesting shit when it comes to the subject matter. That is like what he tends to explore in story, is humanity, our connection with each other, what it means to be human, you know what I mean? But in sort of like a cynical, dark kind of way. And I didn't like that, honestly. I can't say that it really resonated or connected with me. And I think part of it is this idea that like being human isn't really remarkable, if that makes sense. One of the things that is said about one of our characters is that the only thing that sets her apart from other people is the fact that there are so many people that love her. It's not that she herself is an interesting person, it's that people love her, and that's what makes her remarkable. I think everybody is remarkable in their own ways, personally. And maybe that's the American individualism in me. Moving on to Before the Coffee Gets Cold, which again is another book that I just did not enjoy. This one, for different reasons, like it had a different tone. That other book had the tone of like, people suck, kind of. This one is more like, we're all connected, and like, don't live with regrets. The story is about a cafe in Tokyo where you can time travel back into the past. The only problem is that you can only stay in the past until your cup of coffee that has been poured for you before you enter into the past gets cold. And we know that coffee gets cold quickly, so you have to be quick. There's a lot of other stipulations that go along with this, but the big one is that even though you go into the past, you cannot change the future. So you can say whatever you want in the past, but it will not affect the outcome of anything in the future. So like, your sister dies in the present and it's a car crash. You can't tell her not to get in the car on a certain day because she will still die from being in a car crash. So the only thing you can really do is go back and like tell them you loved them or connect with them one last time, that sort of thing. And I'm not saying that's an objectively bad concept. The problem is the execution of it. So the story is not just about one person going back in time, it's about a few different people and their relationship with time travel. The problem is that like story, I think, had problems of their own, and I think part of it probably is cultural. So like, there is a story between a mother and a daughter, and I don't really want to spoil this book, but like, I don't think it really ultimately matters, so skip ahead if you don't want to hear my spoilers. But this woman should not have had children because it would jeopardize her health. She proceeds to do it anyway, dies in childbirth, I believe, never gets to meet her kid, and so she actually, I think she like travels into the future to meet her daughter, and she realizes that like all of it was worth it in the end because her daughter's here. Do I want a child? I sure do. Do I want to jeopardize my own life to have a kid? Not really. Like, if a doctor told me personally that like I would die if I had a child, I don't think I'd be getting pregnant. What kind of message is that? Like, we should be self-sacrificing as women? I don't like that. And that's kind of the vibe I picked up on for some of the other stories as well. Like, I don't think that they really got me to question this idea of going back into the past. It's like a cool concept, and then the execution just it didn't really resonate. Let's just put it that way. Moving on to a book that I mostly enjoyed, Jeff's Choice, about Jean-Pierre and Luna. Both main characters are trans, which I thought was very cool. It's actually featured on Time's like 50 best romances or whatever list that I'm doing a video on very, very soon. So far the list has been quite good and surprisingly diverse, which I appreciate because that doesn't normally happen with lists for list videos. This one, Jean-Pierre is the heir to a like cooking dynasty. His grandpa is really well known for opening up a shitload of different restaurants and them all being Michelin starred, that sort of thing. Mom, I think, has her own cooking show or whatever. Like, he's royalty when it comes to cooking, but he actually doesn't really know how to cook himself. He's also trying to get an inheritance from his grandpa, but to do that, it's to have a girlfriend, and he also needs to cook in increasingly challenging list of dishes to his family standards, like as kind of a competition sort of thing. Kind of stumbles across Luna, recently lost her job, needs some money, so she gets paid to like fake date and or help Jean-Pierre with his cooking. She can't cook either, for the record. The story is interesting. I think the thing that I appreciated most was that both of our main characters are trans, and I got to learn more about the trans experience and what it is like to have people who are both trans but like have very different experiences with what that means to them, carry themselves in very different ways and butt heads in that way. Luna doesn't want to try to fit in, Jean-Pierre does, and so they do kind of like butt heads in that way, and it's a concept that I don't think I've really seen explored very much in romance. I appreciated that quite a bit. I also liked how sexy this book was, frankly. I thought that the characters had a decent amount of chemistry, especially like when it comes to like bedroom situations. I think my problem was that I didn't really feel the romantic spark. Like I didn't really feel like these two were long-term compatible. Like even if they gave each other like sexy looks and like longing glances, I didn't feel like the base connection was there, like the friendship that should be there before a romance blossoms. So I don't know, kind of torn on this one. I also think that Luna's stubbornness and personality at the beginning of the book could be grating for some people, and it was a little grating for me, so like I don't know, I'd probably give this like 3 or 4 stars. Appreciated it, but it wasn't perfect for me. And then moving on to the last 3 books. First up we have Feybound. This is a book that I didn't read any reviews for before picking it up. I think that I might be the only one of my friends who actually enjoyed this one. About our main character Yiren, who is a part of an elven army in this society. There used to be Fey and humans amongst the elves, so different species of people that walked the earth, and now it's just the elves. The elves are kind of like fighting amongst each other for resources, and at the beginning of this book Yiren is like elevated to a higher command, I guess. Now she has like people under her in this army, and again she's like fighting clans that are close by, fighting for resources, that sort of thing, and or like other clans just like live a little differently, so there's some sort of like cultural differences there. She ends up not listening to the person who is above her, like the chief of her particular tribe. She ends up getting exiled and kicked out, and while she is trying to like kind of figure out what the fuck to do, she's like kind of trudging along, she ends up getting captured by the Fae. She obviously doesn't realize that Fae exist, and she realizes that some of the things that she has been doing have been in direct contrast to how the Fae live. I don't want to say it's like a total Farah at the beginning of A Court of Thorns and Roses situation, but she realizes some things pretty quickly. She starts to question everything, and I kind of love that concept. Along the way, before she gets captured, her little sister and her second in command end up following her after she gets exiled to kind of like, I don't know, be with her. Like they love her. They end up getting captured as well. So we have these 3 people who are trying to figure out how to live amongst the Fae, even though the Fae are so different than the elves, or at least I think they're so different than the elves. I don't know. I liked this conceptually. I thought the world was really interesting. I've never read a book with elves before. Well, maybe not never, but like I haven't read a romance with elves before, and I thought that concept was really cool. I liked the magic system. There's so much to like here. I think the problem is that like as a romantasy, heavy on the romance, I don't feel like it was there. Yiren does end up getting with a Fae character, likes women, which is cool. I mean, this is a sapphic romance for the most part. The problem was that it started out as a really promising enemies to lovers situation. There was never an enemies to friends to lovers situation, right? Like they hated each other, and then out of nowhere they kind of just had sex. And I don't think that's like always the worst thing ever, but it needs to be talked about afterwards. Like we need to have some sort of transition again from the enemies to the lovers, the enemies to the being together, and that just doesn't really happen here. There's nothing at the end of this book that like again separates them or like really throws a wrench in their relationship, I don't think, to where or really set up for a second book in a way that's interesting. It's so hard to know how to rate this one because I didn't like the romance, but like I loved the fantasy. Challenging. Let me know if you've read this one, if you enjoyed it. I think I'm probably gonna rate this one 3 stars, just like middle of the road, even though I liked it. It just like wasn't perfect. Last 2 books. Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates. That was not light reading. This is a non-fiction book. Our author is writing to his adolescent teenage son about what it means to be Black in America, with his experiences with it, his musings on it. It is thought-provoking, certainly. It's short, but incredibly rich and dense and impactful, and a book that I believe probably everybody should read, and I know that a lot of people have read. I'm definitely late to the party with this one, but this is truly phenomenal, and I understand why this author is so beloved for his writing, because he just has a way of like writing so thought-provokingly but also not making things inaccessible. That's something that I like really have a hard time with personally, is like when someone is saying something that I know is intelligent and I know is trying to prove a point, but like it just feels so hard to grasp because they're using huge fucking words words, and there's so many like layers to it that like, again, I just like can't seem to parse. This was dense, but it also was accessible. Yeah, thought-provoking on so many levels. I'm just throwing out words at this point. I don't know what to say, except for it was really fucking good. And I don't rate nonfiction, but if I did, it'd be 5 stars. Last book. Okay, this is the one historical romance that I didn't really love. The Caribbean Heiress in Paris. I believe this is the first historical romance by Adriana Herrera. I don't think it was bad. It just didn't totally resonate with me. And I think I was drawing too many comparisons with this one and Isabelle and the Rogue. Books about Luz Alana and Evan. She is kind of in charge of her family's rum business. She comes to Paris to like make connections and or find a way to like sell to different countries. Her company is really cool. Her family's business is very cool. It's like employee run and like profit sharing and stuff like that. Like very modern concepts, right? There is no labor of enslaved people, which is also really fucking cool and uncommon during this time. But our heroine again is trying to sell her rum, and this is obviously something that men typically do. So she's having a hard time making connections with certain business people because she is a woman. She's hoping to maybe marry because if she marries, she gets access to her trust, I believe. And guess what? So does our hero. He gets some sort of inheritance if he marries as well. And he comes across her and he thinks she's beautiful. He loves her gumption and he loves her ambition. And does this sound familiar? Obviously, like they're not spies, so there's like not that aspect to this book. She is from the Caribbean and not Mexico, but there are a fair amount of similarities between this and Isabelle and the Rogue. And I just feel like the romance here was really lacking for me. I loved the concepts. I loved that our heroine was a businesswoman. I thought that was really fucking cool. But the middle part of this book and just like the overall plot of this book I felt like was pretty lackluster. It didn't feel like we were getting from one point to another. It was kind of like, okay, I'm here to sell my rum, and then she like talks to this guy for a while and then they kind of like trudge along and they get married for the inheritance, and like I don't know, it just like it didn't flow well. I feel like the plotting and the pacing was just kind of lacking for me. I wanted there to be a little bit more thrill to this because again, like our heroine does something cool for a living. Like I wanted that to be more the story, and it just like I don't know, the execution was just kind of lacking for me. Those are the 19 books that I read this month. I think that I talked about all of them. Oh shit. Actually, no, I didn't. I know I did not talk about Dawn of Onyx, but you know what? I don't want to because it wasn't a good book. I'm not going to go into details about this one, but this was probably the most bland romantasy that I've read in a long time, so I'm just going to leave it there, okay? If you want to like, I don't know. I was going to say if you want more details on this. No, yeah, I did talk about it in a vlog. I'll leave a link to the vlog that I talked about this in the description down below. Okay, I read it over on the vlog channel. I do read over there. A lot of the books that I talked about in this video, I read over there, but those are all of the 19 books that I read. Not to spoil anything for you, but today is actually the 25th of September, so I have 5 more days, 6 more days to read books, and I am planning on reading some stuff over on Patreon, so I will be posting over here on the community tab when I do so. I'm telling you this because you don't necessarily need to be a Patreon subscriber to get access to my exclusive Patreon videos. I give y'all access to them now. It's an option that I'm given by Patreon, and I am going to be reading some of my most anticipated books of the year. I do this every year where I like, 24 5-star predictions for 2024 kind of thing. I haven't read 3 of those books, so I thought it'd be super fun to read those 3 books and do a vlog on them. So I'm going to be reading Five Brothers by Penelope Douglas, Pirate Girls by Penelope Douglas, and At First Sight by Olivia Dade. So whenever that vlog is done, be on the lookout for it on the community tab if you want to check that one out. I, again, can give y'all access to those videos for a set price, and I always price them at $3. So that is cheaper than if you support me on my other tiers on Patreon. If you like don't want to have that monthly recurring charge, but a video appeals to you, there you go, $3, super easy peasy. And also, again, I read more over on my vlog channel too, if you want to check that out. Just saying. Thanks so much for watching this video. Let me know in the comments down below what your best book of September was, and let me know what you're really excited for the rest of the year. I can't believe we only have 3 months left in the year. Crazy. But I love you so much. See you in the next one.